Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Sunday Space Show program. It's West Coast time, by the way, because even though I'm in Las Vegas, that is still Pacific West Coast time. I'm your host, David Livingston, and we're going to go back in a Wayback Machine for the space show for myself, for our guest, who I will properly introduce in a minute and resurrect. Well, actually, Shubber Ali has resurrected Space Cynics, but more about that in just a few minutes. Quick announcements. I'm out of town for medical up in the Bay Area this coming week. So there probably will be, there for sure is a Hotel Mars show on Planet Way. There will be no Tuesday show this week, no Friday show, no Sunday show. I'll actually still be driving. And then we resume the following Friday. I think that's around the 1st of May or something like that. So everybody gets a vacation from being on the wisdom team. Shepard, this is called the wisdom team, although it changes from week to week. Originally, I did that sort of cynically. It's in my nature. And I guess it's kind of stayed there. Um, Also, people, don't forget we're a nonprofit, 501(c)(3). We exist because many of you do support us. We're listener supportive. So we do have our spaceshow.com website PayPal link in the upper right corner. So that's for PayPal gifts, sending checks because our Las Vegas address is there, and also using Zelle. But we are also on Substack, which is Doctor Space, spelled DoctorSpace .substack.com, and they have their own funding system through Stripe, is what I believe it is. They have their own ways of supporting Substack users. So if you're a Substack user and you want to use their methodology, please do, and we appreciate that. And or you can just go to thespaceshow.com and use PayPal or Zelle or write a check. And I might add that Zelle does not take commissions. So it's really a much more effective, pleasant, and efficient way to donate to your favorite organization than to PayPal or Stripe that do take off fees off of the top. Shubber Ali is back with us. He is the original founder of Space Cynics, which I'm going to have him explain in a minute. I met him because before the space show ever was even conceived, I was working on my doctoral dissertation, and Shepard was at KPMG, and he wrote this incredible financial article about the would-be commercial space industry. So I called him, told him what I was doing, and he was most generous, most helpful, a lot of good guidance, and we became friends ever since then. And in the early years of the space show, especially after Cynics was created, then he was frequently on the show. And the Cynics, the Cynics was, even though he started it, uh, he invited a couple of us to join it. Myself, Tom Olson, who you all know, and Dr. John Jurist, who seems to like in his older years to hibernate on his ranch in Montana. Uh, and hunker down from whatever things are going to happen to the world that he used to know when he was a younger guy. So Shepard is with us. So he has a great resume and background. He's in tech, but I've talked too long, so I'm going to bring him on the show. But his bio is posted on the Space Show website, and I'm going to have Shubber properly tell everybody about Space Cynics and our Walking Eagle Award that we handed out and got a lot of shit for handing it out. And
No pun intended, right?
yeah, and a lot of fun at the same time. And we were not wrong. That probably is the best
Yeah.
vindication about all of it. Shepard, welcome to the program, and tell us about Space Cynics. What is it?
Uh,
And let us know before we start talking with you.
All right. First off, David, thank you. It's great to be back after way too long. I still have my space show mug around here somewhere from when it back in the days when I used to be on your show. I think it's because back then it was harder for you to get guests, and so I would be on regularly. But um, yeah, so the walking eagle. Well, that was a specific um, thing we created within the Space Cynics. So I'll go back to what the Space Cynics blog was, how it got started, and all the rest of that. But for the Walking Eagle specifically, just jump to the TLDR is um, that we created this award. There's an old I don't know what it's called, old story, whatever else about a walking eagle. And a walking eagle was basically an eagle that was so full of crap it couldn't fly, um, and so it was a walking eagle. And we then started giving the Walking Eagle Award to companies that would just tell the most outlandish stories about what they were going to do, or what it was even worse is when they said are doing, right? Using the current tense for future plans, which we just took exception to as the cynics. And so we'd give out these awards and we'd get people who get mad at us because they say, but you're saying you're doing things that you're not actually doing. And of course, as you pointed out, they always proved correct. They meaning us in our judgments on these companies. But hey, one of the things about being a cynic is it means that you're generally not going to be liked by a lot of people, and that never really bothered me. So it started the Space Cynic blog, though. I think in the mid 2000s, if I remember correctly. So in the 90s, I'm going to go back and wind up my own career a little bit and how we met. But back in the 90s, I was with KPMG, which at the time was really the only space consulting business in the industry globally. And we had the team here based in the US. I was manager of that team and worked for a great guy, Larry Jansky, who's the partner. We actually, the consulting group that was started by Larry's predecessor, Frank DeBello, who then left to they actually incubated inside of KPMG, just as I was getting there, SpaceVest, which was the first VC focused on the space industry, which some of you may remember. And SpaceVest had their big home run with Fund 2, which was the one that actually had analytical graphics in it. And that's when they really took off back in the mid 90s, because all the little Leos and big Leos were being put on uh, getting investment and being planned and all the rest. And there were, I think, like 53 Ka and Ku band systems on paper. As we know, most of them never got built. So our consulting group was focused on the business side of space, and that's always been the angle I take at looking at the space industry. Is my degree, my undergraduate degree is in economics, and my MBA as well. And I just focus on, like, but does it actually make sense? Does it work? I leave the engineering aside. Engineering is a separate issue, um, which we'll come to later. But it was really just the economics. And as the years progressed, we wrote the first State of the Space Industry report, which we wrote with SpaceVest, the Center for uh, Wireless Telecommunications, and we had one other partner as well. And we developed this report that we put out annually on the how big the market was. And we broke it down by segment, launch, remote sensing, GPS, communications, et cetera, ground stations, all of that, so that people get a sense of what the industry was really about. And one of the things that we used to harp on a lot was the need for usability in rockets. And you may remember, most of you probably remember this. That was the time of the first batch of the RLV companies, right? You had Kistler and Kelly and Rotary and Space Access and Pioneer, and they were like the first five that were trying to, with very different designs, trying to raise money, and they raised different amounts of money depending on who they were, to create reusability, because everybody knew you had to make rockets reusable if you wanted to really change the space industry and open up the high frontier. Um,
When about was this? Because we had obviously the space shuttle was reusable. So when did you come up with
well,
this
no, no, no,
idea?
no. Let's not pretend that the economics of the space shuttle made any sense
Yeah, but it was
whatsoever. It was
reusable. You don't
Well,
deny.
part of it was reusable. Part of it, the actual
Mostly, yeah.
orbiter, sure, but
Yeah.
the thing that took it up there was not the first stage, which was, sure, they fished the rockets out of the water later, but the external tank would burn up in the atmosphere. But the shuttle economics were all predicated, and there's a great book on this. William Burroughs' This New Ocean, which came out in the late 90s, it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for History, goes through the economics in detail of just the lie that was sold to Congress on funding the shuttle in the first place, in terms of the flight rates that they projected. I think it was like on the order of 760 a year,
Mhm.
which, as we all know, is laughable, in order to make it work. But the original shuttle was supposed to have a flyback booster. The whole thing was supposed to be reusable. Um, but then you fast forward into the 90s, Delta Clipper actually worked, right? DCX, which everybody forgets about, but it proved reusability even if it was just a single, a little hop in it, and then it fell over. But that then led to X-33, and before we went on to live camera, that then led to VentureStar, and we worked on the business plan for um, VentureStar and the spaceports in the late 90s, with a number of the different states, right? So we were working with California and Texas and Florida, even Idaho, um, and the point being, reusability was the thing. I remember still speaking at a conference, the FAA's third, at the time it was the third annual commercial space conference at the Marriott by the Key Bridge, and I gave a talk on the need for commercial, reliable, reusable access to space, CRATS, right? Um, and everybody was flying expendable, which, if you were Boeing and Lockheed and Arianespace and the rest, it made sense because your customers were willing to pay the price of an expendable rocket, right? If you had to put up an NRO satellite or you had to put up a DoD satellite, you just wrote a check and you bought your rocket. So there was no vested interest for them to lower the cost of a Delta II from 65 million to 15 million or 10 million. Why would they do it, right? So they made their money. But if you looked at all the downstream things that could happen, and we know it now because SpaceX did it, and within 5 years they had over 50% of the market because the economics were better, and now they have Starlink, right? And now they're about to completely um, bury themselves with their whole data centers in space and XAI thing, which we'll come back to. But leave aside their $1.75 trillion IPO for the moment. So, anyways, fast forward a little bit, and in the early 2000s, you started to see a lot of new space hype stuff happen after the dot-com crash. And around that time, there was this whole thing about the $1 trillion asteroid, and people who've never taken an economics course who think that if you just suddenly flood the market with 10 metric tons of rare earth metals, you're going to maintain the price of today's rare earth metals, which makes no sense. But the book came out, and I think it was Zubrin's Case for Space, and the $1 trillion asteroid was in there, and I was like, this is nonsense. And I was like, hey, that's it. We got to write a blog. So we started writing the Space Cynics, and I started it. And then shortly thereafter, John and Tom and David joined me, and we just started poking all the stupid things that we saw, and that's how it started.
And your articles that you've been doing of late for about the last 6, 8 months, you have brought with it the same cynical tone. But you do run numbers. I mean, you do. Jim
I
Logan
do.
would be very proud of you because you have brought numbers to the game, and everything else you may or may not trust in God. I don't know that about your religious beliefs, but you do bring numbers that people can maybe find fault with or say you're wrong or this or that and the other, but at least they have numbers.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite of late Cynics article?
Uh, I don't have a favorite of late. I've only just started writing it, and part of it is that, like, I have a day job, so it just what got me started on writing it again, to be honest, was LinkedIn has become just a Facebook trash heap of a business site. It's like it's become this thing where everybody is creating AI slop, posting it constantly, and for some reason, LinkedIn seems to think I want to see all the space slop. And so every time I would open LinkedIn, I would get like 10 breathless articles in a row written in that AI voice that you all know, which is basically somebody too lazy to write an article, says, hey, chat, write me an article about how awesome space reflective mirrors are and all the great, like, punchy stuff about it, and then give me a good image. And then they just post it to LinkedIn. Well, I get hit with all this slop, and I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? And it was with the data centers that I was like, all right, that's it. Because there were so many articles from people who, like, the thing that, like, really called out to me was oh, and the best part is they've solved the cooling problem because space is cold. And I'm like, no, it's not. Space isn't cold. Space is a vacuum. If you've ever had a Yeti tumbler, you know what a vacuum is and how it differs from really cold, right? And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start writing about this. And so I started posting. I would think that, you know, it's it's easy for people to get hyped up about space, especially because of SpaceX. And I think there's like this whole SpaceX halo effect now that has actually made it harder to differentiate the bullshit from the real. And so people are raising a lot of money. And as a guy with an AI company in a non-space area where I actually have to go out and raise money from real investors and do stuff, and we've got a real working product. And I'm like, it just sucks that things like this get the hopium effect, and then they raise a ton of money, and they hurt a lot of companies like ones I know, including my own, by making it harder for us to go raise money because we're not willing to tell bullshit, right? So data centers, I would say, is probably the biggest one just because it's got so much visibility right now, followed by orbital mirrors.
We talk a lot about data centers, and of course, the comments Musk has made on data centers and stuff have made lots and lots of people believers. There's still people, actually, a couple here in this group, especially Dr. Kathari, who joined us a little bit late. He's an aerospace engineer and a nuclear
Hey, Jay.
from Maryland. He's not far from you. Maryland's not a big
Yeah.
place. And they don't see any economics with data centers. And then one of my favorite business podcasts, the All In podcast, those guys are talking about AI data centers and stuff on the moon and stuff like this is God is handing them trillions and trillions of dollars over the coming future, and they're not dummies. I mean, they're financial megastars, I guess. So what do you see about data centers that says the red flag BS is flying proud and high?
So it falls into three areas. There's time frame, there's physics, and there's engineering. So I'll start with time frame. Anybody who's talking about putting real data centers in space in the next 5 years is just bullshit. It's not going to happen because if you even look at just the sheer numbers you have to put up, there's a big difference between running one GPU in space like StarCloud did and building an actual data center that compares with a 5 gigawatt data center on the ground. It's night and day, right? Just look at the amount of energy you're talking about. Look at the thermal dissipation you're talking about. There's real problems within a 5 year window. Okay, fast forward further out. This is where I go back to 30 years ago or 25 years ago. These two guys wrote a book, Dow 30,000. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're crazy. You're hyping because the Dow was at what? Like, I don't know, 7,000 at the time. And I'm like, eventually, will it be 30,000? Sure. And sure enough, it hit 30,000 because you know what? Inflation, law of large numbers, over time, it all happens. So if you're asking me in 20 years, will we have data centers? No question about it. Will we have them as quickly as they're saying? No. So you have to break it into, again, there's a time frame factor. Let's take SpaceX's million satellites in space. Just do the launch calculations. If you say a Falcon 9 can carry 27 satellites of a Starlink type, say, assuming they get Starship working, which, by the way, doesn't actually work yet, right? In terms of being able to fly repeatedly, reusably, and deploy a bunch of data center satellites out of it, hasn't happened yet. So let's just go with Falcon 9 at 27 satellites per launch. And last year they had, I'm just looking at my numbers here. Last year, I believe they had about 165 launches. So let's just assume that they increased that to 3 times that cadence. Let's say they'll have about 500 launches a year, right? Pretend that for a second. Let's keep the same number of satellites. Assume a data center satellite's the same size as a Starlink. And you're talking about 13,000 satellites a year get deployed at that cadence. 13,000. It would take them 75 years to build the fucking constellation. So everybody was like, oh, this thing's worth 1.75 trillion. They're going to build a data center in space. I'm like, you're idiots, right? It's really not that hard to do basic math. You can build it in an Excel spreadsheet and figure that out. So let's assume that they get Starship working. And let's assume Starship has 9 times the capacity of a Falcon 9. Just let's pretend that it's really big and carry almost 250 satellites per launch. At the current launch rate, it would still take of 165 launches a year, which I think is pretty generous for a brand new rocket. But let's assume they can get 165 of those up a year. It would take them 25 years to deploy that constellation. And that does not include replacement. Because, oh, by the way, if you assume these satellites are only going to last 5 years at a time, and they're running their GPUs and everything else, and you don't need to do any sort of replacement because of any sort of orbital problems, because, by the way, you can't go up and swap out a GPU. So you have to replace the whole satellite because it's not like a data center where you just swap out a rack. Once they're up there, we don't do spacewalks to change data centers. That's another That's a 5-year lifespan. So now you have to divide that number by, into 1/5 and say that's how many replenishment satellites you have to put up a year. So that 25 years becomes closer to like 32, 33 years. It doesn't work. The math doesn't work.
So what does Musk see that you don't see?
Well, I don't take ketamine. I couldn't tell you, right? I mean, he also still believes they have full self-driving, which they don't. He also believes a lot of things that are not true. Am I saying he's not really smart and driven? Absolutely not. The guy has built amazing stuff. With Tesla, I have a Tesla. Great car, but I would never trust it to drive me somewhere, right? It has, he's built SpaceX, but let's be really clear. He had the vision, he had the money, and he hired all the right people because it's the people who built SpaceX. It's the people who built Tesla, right? Gwen Shotwell is an amazing CEO. She drove SpaceX, right? He might have the vision, but it's all the people there who make it happen. Boring Company? Okay, they got one tunnel in Las Vegas. You're there. Have you ever been in it?
Can't even tell you where the entry point or the departure
Oh, I
point.
know where it is. I've been in it once. It is claustrophobic as hell. I would never ride in that thing again.
Where is the entry?
It's somewhere near the what's the pirate one? Treasure Island, somewhere around there. There's a parking lot and then a tunnel you go into, and then you all of a sudden you're in this thing that's like slightly wider than the car. But he was going to build a tunnel between DC and New York, right? There are a lot of promises the guy made. You have to remember that. It's like, I mean, I even have the flamethrower here in my office. If you want to see the boring flamethrower, I've got one of them. But I collect a lot of stuff for things that are BS. I actually have my Star Cloud T-shirt somewhere. I got to find that too. But my point being, this almost goes back to the old Carl Sagan quote. They laughed at Fulton, laughed at Galileo, they laughed at you, and they also laughed at Bozo the Clown, right? It doesn't mean that everything the guy says is true or it's going to happen. He's hyping an IPO. Of course, he's going to say it, right? He took a company that was losing money. This is the part that blows my mind. SpaceX last year made $8 billion, mainly through Starlink, right? Now, they just merged it with a company that on paper was valued at $250 billion called XAI. What valued it at $250? Oh, he did, because he owns both companies. So he said, okay, I think it's worth $250 billion. And he said, oh, you're right. It is worth 250. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. And all of a sudden they put the two things together and then they say it's worth 1.75 trillion. But XAI lost $13 billion very quickly. So basically SpaceX suddenly became a money-losing company because they're burning more on the AI than they made in all the SATCOMs and the launches. So how is that company worth $1.75 trillion?
So
Except bankers who want to IPO it.
I would throw in, how are you accounting for that which is not tangible? So for example, every time I read or hear on TV, where most of the journalists don't know what they're talking about, but let's leave that aside. A data center wants to go up. The people are either protesting, they don't want it. The costs are too high. They don't have the power from the local utility companies to furnish it. So people are really concerned that your utility rates are going to go up. You can't get nuclear yet in the US, whether
Right.
ever can
No, it
get
would take 20 years to
neutrality
permit and
state.
build.
That's
Yeah.
probably 20 years. So the data center environment on Earth, at least in the United States that I'm aware of, stinks. And so now they say
It's
there's
not
no
as bad as
regs
you'd.
in space. So let's go up and do it in space. We'll have a near.
It's cold. It's permanent sunlight, so there's free energy. It's like, yeah, it sounds great. I mean, it sounds like PX90. If you remember those old DVDs that would make you like ripped if you just watch them. It's not. It's so let's break apart the data center thing. So on the ground, what's really interesting is, yeah, there are some states that are pushing back, and yeah, there's some places that are pushing back on the cost of energy. But like you can still get permitting in places like Texas and a lot of other places. But the bigger issue is, have you looked at how many data centers are actually getting built? Not because they're being blocked by locals, but because it turns out they just don't have like the construction, they don't have the people, they don't have the power getting to that place. And then all those GPUs that were purchased are sitting in Taiwan waiting to be put in, but they're depreciating assets now. So when you look at the actual build versus what was proclaimed, they were going to build, I don't know, 35 gigawatts of power, and they're only got like 10 under contract right now for construction for 2026. It's like a lot of stuff doesn't make any sense unless you step way back and say, There's a massive bubble that's about to blow up. The nice thing is that this bubble is not a too big to fail bubble. If OpenAI and Anthropic and all the rest of them just completely collapse, other than the exposure to pension funds and other things that dropped money into them because they're idiots, it's not like the housing market collapse of 2008. It's not everybody's mortgage. It's not all these, adjustable rates going under at the same time. This is thankfully not the same level of contagion. It's not the banks losing liquidity because AIG went under. I mean, it's not like a systemic problem. It's just a train wreck that a lot of people are actually seeing coming, but it's a lot easier to hype up because journalists love telling, good stories, and no one holds them accountable later on when they get it wrong.
So, so what's your bottom line here?
The AI industry is in for a bit of a reckoning. NVIDIA and others will take a haircut. Um, Data centers will get built. Companies are already starting to question the real value they're getting out of AI. I see a lot of experiments. I mean, I come from the tech industry. I see a lot of companies doing pilots and experiments. I have yet to see a scaled application of AI across industry. All this like, oh, it's going to wipe out 50% of jobs. Might take parts of your job, but actually wipe out jobs? I don't think so. Not anytime soon. Um, it's got some applications, but everything is so overvalued. And the really interesting part is because they're so overvalued, no one wants to acquire them. So their only way out is to IPO. Their only way out is to go public because there's always dumb retail investors who'll put money in, right? And as long as they hype it up, I mean, look, we know from the space industry, all the SPACs that happened, right? How did they turn out?
Most
Not
not,
very well,
yeah.
because it's just a way to get liquidity. It's a way to back it. So I think that the AI and space thing is another distraction to keep the train running, to keep the hype cycle running as long as possible. I mean, I really hope SpaceX tries to do it so that we can finally put a nail in this coffin. Not because eventually it won't happen, but because it's not going to happen in the next 5 years. And all these, I mean, anybody who's taken a finance class knows it's all about time value of money. So it doesn't matter if they'll make $1 trillion in space 30 years from now. The stock price today shouldn't reflect 30 years from now. It should reflect the time value of money and what's going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years.
I just sort of disagree with that statement. Why should the 5 year time horizon be important? Like if you got an analysis that says that in 10 years you're going to make $5 trillion, why isn't that a valid investment?
Well, no, if you're going to make $5 trillion, sure, then discount that with discounted cash flows and figure out what the current value of that is. That's like finance 101. But they're making $8 billion right now. Tell me how they're going to make $5 trillion
Like
with
I
data
guess
centers.
I mean the assumptions you have to make here are that the rate that AI is getting better, its potential to create value in the economy by essentially doing work
Doing
that
what?
doing it in any sort of white collar job plus a lot of other things. Like there's a lot of work that AI can do that makes our economy run better, and it's getting better every year, and it seems on track.
Three examples. Give me three
Mhm.
examples.
Well,
Give
let's
me three
say, for
examples.
example, like if AI can start driving cars, right?
Not if. Give me three examples of what it does better right now.
Well, right now it does much better at drafting any kind of document you want to write. You can increase
No,
your
no, it
productivity
doesn't.
significantly. Yeah, yeah, it
No, it
does.
doesn't.
There's
No, it
no
doesn't.
question it can draft some document you want to write. Like if you want to write a letter to your to somebody and have it say the right stuff, it can
And
it can really come up with great suggestions and save you time. There's no question about that.
so first off, drafting emails is not a $5 trillion business. Continue.
It is if you're producing and you produce your product is some form of paper or no, really seriously, if you're producing a paper that explains what you're trying to do as a technical engineer or any kind of scientist, and this
Yep.
thing can save you time writing the paper because it
Yep.
drafts the text quickly and it takes your ideas and puts them into a form that's readable and digestible very quickly, and it creates grants for you quickly. These are all things that add value, makes your life as a scientist or an engineer or anybody a lot easier. So it's adding value to your workflow, makes you more productive in a given year because you're spending less of your time doing grant writing or paper writing and more of your time doing real research. So
Then why isn't
yes,
everybody doing that?
everybody is doing it.
They aren't doing that.
They are. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you're not in touch
This
with
is
like
this
how
is
much
why all
AI is
the AI
being
companies are
used.
losing money because they're all doing this, right?
Yeah, like do you think that people are not using AI? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think people are using it. I think they're also finding out that it has a lot of flaws. I use it to draft stuff all the
Sure.
time, and then I have to correct it because
Yeah.
it makes mistakes. It hallucinates. And hallucination is nothing more than the probability effect of what it's doing. It's not
Yeah, but it
a
still makes you
hallucination
fast.
like
You
it.
wouldn't be using it if it wasn't, you didn't feel it was making you faster. It's like you still use a word processor.
But
You don't type in a
but
typewriter anymore because
well,
the word processor is better. It's make
oh God, the problem with analogies is they suck, right? There's like people who talk about like the thing between this and railroads. No, there's a fundamental difference, and part of it goes back to the fact that GPUs are depreciating assets, right? So they have to take impairments for all this shit they're buying right now that is not creating enough value to justify the price of them. And Marshall, we will get to you because I see your hand is patiently been up.
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, I'll kick in right here. One of the first things I look for in, I guess you'd call it a sales pitch and projections in the future, is when they start talking about the future is asymptotically, exponentially taking off,
The hockey
and
stick.
they don't talk about any limiting excuse my lips, asymptotes that are
Asymptote.
going to make it
You're
go
saying trying to say
flat.
asymptote.
Yeah, and
Yeah, you mean when it goes to diminishing returns, right?
yes, and
Yeah.
then you also come in there and they don't make any discount for the fact that the more of it you have, the less valuable it becomes.
Right.
I.e., gold versus sand.
You mean like the $1 trillion asteroid, right? Where they're like, oh, but
Yeah,
look at this thing. It's like half made out of platinum. Great. Bring it
yeah,
back, see what happens.
yeah. So that's the kind of thing I look for. And you seem to be an expert at spotting that kind of thing. Um, what's your technique for spotting the mathematical bullshit?
I'm not an expert. It's the thing I learned in my very first class in my economics so that, like I said before, that's what my degree is in economics.
Mm-hmm.
The thing you learn in your very first economics class is supply and demand, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
really simple. And whenever you increase the supply of something and you hold demand constant, the price is going to go down, right? So unless you come up with a billion new uses for the thing that keeps the demand growing, you're going to have the price go down. And so the reason why things are expensive is scarcity. When you eliminate scarcity, there's only one example that you can pull up of that everybody seems to know of something that is actually not a scarce item, but is kept artificially scarce so they keep the price high, and that's diamonds, right? But if you actually flood the market with quality diamonds, like across the world, the amount that was out there, the price would go down because it's all marketing. But if you want to make the claim that not you, but if somebody wants to make the claim that I can bring back this massive amount of this incredibly scarce item, and there's not a commensurate growth in demand for said item, like, all of a sudden we need 10 trillion catalytic converters, and so all that platinum becomes really valuable, or we need all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to do is flood the market with an asset that will then drive down its price. It's why, air doesn't cost nearly as much as, an expensive item like gold, unless you're in New York and you're buying oxygen in a bar, but that's people have too much money. AJ.
I have a couple of things to say.
Yeah.
First of all, I think as an argument against Phil Swan here, what you said, Phil, about a lot of people writing grant proposals, etc., in getting more grants, that is not going to happen because the total amount of money for grants is limited. So all you're doing is creating a competition between those people, and so that doesn't increase the amount of supply. That's one thing.
But what I was trying to say is that
But before
if a person
I
has like so many hours in a year and they now can spend less time writing the grant and more time doing the research, that's a benefit to them.
It's a benefit, yes, and we have benefited from Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office and everything, but it has not really changed the equation in terms of the number of people employed and all those kinds of things. But anyway, I wanted to get to the other couple of other points also. Let me just do that first. Another bad idea that another couple of bad ideas that Elon Musk has come up with, besides the boring companies, of course, where the Hyperloop came from. And the Hyperloop is absolutely a stupid idea. And he kind of, he came up with, going from Los Angeles to, San Francisco in 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever it is. We have something that does that. It's called an airplane. It's called a subsonic airplane. And so, if you're trying to do something, putting all these things in the tube and which is, terrorist mecca, so to speak, terrorism mecca, so to speak, that's just really a stupid idea. Boring Company came out of that. And I know I'm from Maryland, and the state of Maryland supported that idea a long time ago, to do that from Baltimore out, DC to whatever. That's really a stupid idea. That's another stupid idea.
But AJ, so you're just saying it's a stupid idea. You haven't said exactly why it's a stupid idea. You haven't provided any real substantive reason why the idea doesn't make economic sense. You're just saying
the idea of digging a tunnel between DC and Baltimore?
Yeah, no, DC.
No, he's saying Hyperloop doesn't. He's saying Hyperloop is a stupid idea without any reason why it doesn't make economic sense. There's no stated reason.
I can discuss that, but
yeah, do that. Like, don't just say it's a stupid idea 5 times. Spend your energy saying this is specifically why it's a bad idea.
Okay, I'm gonna step in here. Shubber is the guest on his topics and what he's bringing to it, and you guys are known for commandeering space show programs with your own private discussions. So stop it. And let him have the microphone. Shubber didn't write an article on Hyperloop. If he wants to comment on him, he's more than welcome to do so. But there's other topics that I wanted to move to and discuss with him. I don't want to commandeer it and hijack.
No, I'm trying to support what Shubber Ali is saying.
Well, that's fine, but let him have his topics, AJ.
But I will. Okay, so to AJ's point, because thank you, AJ. I actually will say this to answer Phil's question. Why was it a dumb idea? Because the stupidity was not in the concept of Hyperloop. I actually think that the idea of using a technology like that, when proven, is not a bad way to move stuff around. It was the dismissal of all of the practical, financial, regulatory, geological, every other aspect of digging a fucking tunnel from DC to Baltimore that was just ignored, and everybody's like, we're going to do a tunnel. It's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. Like, try digging a tunnel under New York and see what happens. Because, oh, by the way, the city goes down like 600 feet, right? It's not just empty dirt, right? You want to dig through all this place, you need to first do studies, seismic studies. Turns out we've had earthquakes here in DC. So you want to do all these things before you just put your boring machine in, dig a tunnel, and then start driving cars up and down. It's not because it's conceptually a bad idea. It's because he just leaps from, hey, I've got this great idea, and then everybody's like, oh, let's go do this. That's the problem, right? So now he's saying we're going to put 1.5 million or 1 million satellites in space. And everybody's like, oh, he's a genius. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
See, I come from an economics perspective. So I'll tell you why it's a stupid idea, because economically it doesn't make sense. And then, from a launch perspective, show me a cadence where it makes sense. Yeah, not saying you can't engineering-wise build a satellite. He's already proven that. That's why I think Starlink was such a great idea. And it's one of the things, if you go back to the Space Cynics blog, and the cynics part should really give you an idea of how I feel about these things. But I actually changed it for like a year to the Space Enthusiast blog, because after the Falcon touched down, I was like, see, somebody finally did it. Now stuff is going to happen. What I didn't realize was a lot of bullshit was going to happen again, because now you got people going out there saying, oh, look, I flew one GPU in space and I ran an inference on it. I've got a data center. Like, no, you don't. You have one GPU. No, by the way, it overheated, which they kind of conveniently ignore.
Yeah. And I would also say that I think that you said that you are not an engineer, but some of the work that you've done, actually you have, and I'll give an example of the optical mirror. You said that 0.01 degree difference in direction from the optical mirror to Earth would make the beam or whatever 87 meters away from where it was supposed to be, and actually, and of course it's double that if you include the reflection and etc. So I agree with that, and that would also bring me to the space-based solar power ideas, and that is even worse because we are talking about geo. So
Yeah, well,
our data is is 40,000 kilometers instead of 400. It's
yeah.
just really another. Uh, so I think that you have an engineering
Well, I did
part
study
in
aerospace
you too.
engineering. I just
Huh?
majored in economics at the end of the
Yeah, I
day.
know. Yeah, so you can do
What I
something.
will say actually about space-based solar power, because I gave a talk at the Eisenhower Institute in 2008, I think, in Colorado, on space-based solar power. Right. So set the Wayback Machine away. This is how long it takes for anything to happen in space. And John Menkins has been leading the charge on
Yeah.
space-based solar power forever. NASA proved you could beam power, right? This is not like science fiction. The
Mhm.
issue is, again, going back to
Going back.
economics and
Yeah.
engineering, building a structure the size you would need to build to have a space-based solar powered facility at GEO, which, like you said, is 40,000 kilometers away, when the only
Mhm.
thing we've ever assembled in orbit is a couple
Yeah.
hundred miles up, ISS, right? And that's a much smaller thing. When you're at GEO, you're not going to go up there and service it. So you better make it completely autonomous and robotic and self-healing and all the rest of that. Two, um, think about the mass you have to launch up there. Do I think that, again, maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever, maybe 100 years from now, we'll have space-based solar power satellites? Sure, because they make sense. They make sense in the idea that you could actually get power, assuming we can convert it at the right efficiency and beam it to a antenna on the ground where we can actually then absorb the power and convert it back into usable stuff. Sure, it makes
So,
sense hypothetically, but from a practical engineering point today or in the next 5 years, it does not make sense.
so
And
I want to
this is
jump in
the
here and say that, like, I'm also a complete skeptic of solar power. I'm 100% with you on that doesn't make sense for the exact opposite reasons from what you're saying. You're saying it doesn't make sense because we can't do big things. And I would say it doesn't make sense because there's no way it's ever going to make sense. The economics never will support it, because if you look at the losses in the chain from converting photons from the sun down through photons that are beamed to the rectenna back to electrons in the grid, you look at all the losses in that system and the cost of putting mass into orbit, like, the economics are ridiculous. It's like thousands of times more expensive than power on the ground. So there's no way it's ever going to make sense with those economics unless we have some sort of
with
incredible
today's
breakthrough.
economics. So
Like
totally
the
agree with
economic
you on that.
breakthroughs would have to be thousandfold in terms of converting energies between
Yeah.
photons and electrons. It's just not
Yeah.
going to happen for years and years, hundreds of years. And
Well,
so,
I don't know about hundreds
I,
of years, because again, Moore's law is an interesting thing in the chip world. We have seen how much solar efficiency has gone up even on panels like I have on my roof on the ground. I don't know, but I will say that engineering wise, leave aside whether or not somebody in 30 years can solve the physics of it, like to make better transmission and absorption, all the rest. All I'm saying is it doesn't make sense today for all the reasons that even if you could magically wave a wand and make the energy equation work, it still doesn't work.
because of
Right?
the
Because
cost of launch or
you're
something like
making
the
that, right?
cost of launch, the size of the structure you'd have to build, the fact we have no way of servicing it, we don't do human spacewalks at 40,000
Yeah.
kilometers. Like, there are just so many engineering challenges that
so,
people wave their hands. And every time I see somebody wave their hands, I'm like, no, you can't do that. Not if you're, especially not if you're raising money from investors, right? Which is why this is where I really have like an allergic reaction, which is where the walking eagle came from. Like, if you want to spend your own money, hell, Beale tried to build a rocket back in the late 90s, right? And we used to have the old joke, how do you make a millionaire in space? Start with a billionaire,
Yeah.
right? Um, the difference here now is that everybody's like, well, I'm just gonna wave a magic wand and say, like, when Tom Olson had the StarCloud CEO on his show a few months back, like, I was typing questions in, and Tom read a few on there. I'm like, okay, so you said that you can put this thing up there. Assume you do a distributed instead of a single, like, data center, which is how they were first positioning it. I'm like, you can't cool that thing. So let's pretend you're going to have thousands of satellites. How are you going to get them up there? And he was like, oh, well, we use SpaceX. I'm like, why the hell would SpaceX launch for you at wholesale? Right? I mean, they'll charge themselves wholesale because they're launching their own satellites. That's what they do with Starlink. But why would they charge a competitor anything but retail? And if they're charging you retail, the economics of your system don't work again. Right? It's like, sorry. I
No,
just,
that's very
it
fair. I mean,
pains me.
I think
It
that's ultimately
pains
what
me.
comes down to is launch costs, and
It,
the math illusion that launch costs have been dropping, which is
They
actually not
haven't.
supported by the data. Yeah.
Right. They haven't.
Yeah.
And then the launch volume required to do some of the things we're talking about is just it. I mean, a simple Excel spreadsheet tells you they don't work.
Blue
Yep.
Origin flew successfully today. Does that mean we'll soon see competitive strides in the launch rates?
Um,
Second stage failed.
I didn't hear that
oh,
it
did
failed.
it?
Oh, thank you for
Yeah,
that.
they were not able to place their payload in the right orbit.
Yeah.
Then the answer would be not yet.
Thank you for that update.
I think it's actually interesting that we actually do have some competitors to SpaceX already, and yet the prices haven't fallen significantly because of competition. It suggests that the competition isn't really the problem, or the lack of competition isn't a problem.
So,
Well, there's not enough demand for. I mean, again, leave Starlink out of it for a moment. The demand for launch has not grown. With like, why would you bring the price down when you can charge full freight and still get people's payloads, right? If somebody needs to launch a ComSat, like for instance, a geostationary ComSat, like let's say it's Intelsat or one of those guys, they want to launch a satellite. They've already built the cost of launch into their entire business plan. So if it costs them 80 million to go to orbit or 120 million, that's what it costs them, right? And the insurance cost is already built into the business plan, everything else. Their economics were already figured out. It's all the new stuff that people want to do, but is there enough demand for that new stuff? And so now I think we're talking again about hotels in space. I don't know if people paid attention to just how what the experience was like for the astronauts going around the moon, because there was a whole segment on their toilet failing and they managed to get it working again. That was in the news, but I think people have a misunderstanding of what being in space actually is like for an extended period of time. Like before you go book a 2-week vacation in space, you might want to think about all the boring stuff like going to the bathroom.
So, Shubber, I have done recent shows with some of the proponents of the space hotel. One of them is going to have it operational in John Jossi can help me fix it. The time date, 2 years, something like that. Another one's a little bit longer out. So that should be a big walking eagle in my opinion. But here's the dilemma.
What happened to Bigelow's?
Well, I can tell you the story that I have heard. So he could not get an economically feasible ride to space, no matter how hard he tried, not even from SpaceX. So even though he had the two successful scaled HABs flying in space, and by the way, both are still flying, they have not deorbited,
Yeah.
he couldn't go anywhere with it. His daughter suddenly died. Now, I don't know to what degree, not to what degree, but to what she died from. I don't know if it was a long illness or sudden or what, but that spun him for a really big loop, is what people I have talked to have told me. And he saw space as a dead end. But what he wanted to do, as crazy as this is to form an institute to scientifically make contact with the dead because of the loss of his daughter. And he formed an institute, and I did reach out to him when he formed it to come on the show and never got an answer from him. He did start an institute, and he's got legitimate scientists. They do not seek PR, and they are really trying to scientifically see if there is a way to make contact with the dead, because I guess he doesn't want to let go of his daughter. I mean, that's what I am hearing. So at AIAA in August or July, whenever it was, I met his granddaughter, gorgeous young woman, and she was on a panel about the first $1 trillion in space. So I went up and asked her if she was Bigelow's daughter, and she said, no, I'm his granddaughter. And I said, is it true he's out of the space business and trying to make contact with the dead? And she said, yes, and you should contact him if you want more information. And I invited her to the show, and then on economics of commercial space, because she said on that AIAA panel that, yeah, we're close to having $1 trillion business in space, okay? and I think that's BS. But
Did she say what that trillion-dollar business was?
no, they just spoke in general on this AIAA panel. Okay. Um, and this was before all the data center and all the AI talk and all that stuff was going on. And then she canceled out and she said, she's a commercial venture capital company. And she says, there's some things that have come up and I can't talk publicly, but why don't we reconnect in a year and maybe I can come on the show. So I do know how to connect her. I'm sure she'll remember who I am because we did talk at length about her father and about his daughter. And that's what I hear happened to Bigelow in the turn that he took. When I'm driving around Las Vegas, I see Bigelow storage centers, like the neighborhood
Yep.
storage centers around.
Yep.
I see he has that as a business, which would be natural for his hotel business, budget hotels. I understand he's sold out of budget in some markets, but nobody knows anything about his North Las Vegas huge research site for Bigelow Aerospace. And I don't know if his control room for Genesis 1 and 2 is still functioning, or if
Hmm.
NASA or the military watches it for space debris or what the status of that is. I never could get an email address for him. They used to say he didn't want to deal with email. So I could call and get a hold of his personal liaison and work the show with him like that. But all of that is gone. So that's what I know about Bob Bigelow.
Oh, well, it's terrible about his daughter.
Now,
I'm not going to go down the other rabbit hole of contacting the dead, but um, it will be. Oh, uh, thanks, John, for
if
the
you pulled
link
that
on.
off, that'd be, quite a thing. But what I was going to ask you, we just finished all the big PR and everybody's inspired and hot to trot with Artemis 2. Okay.
Hmm.
And I watched it on two main networks, CNN and on Fox. So
Hmm.
the first thing I noticed is the moon is going to be so commercial. We're soon going to have data centers. Musk is going to do this. There's so much commercial opportunity. And this is what the ordinary people are hearing. And they're hyped up and they're enthusiastic. And
Yeah, he had in the past. I
Shubber,
remember him saying that the moon was a distraction. So
yeah, but the news media is so uninformed. And so I don't know if they're deliberately misleading or just stupidly misleading. I don't know if it makes a difference. And I don't know how you can correct it. It's not worth anybody's
he,
time or money to attempt to correct it, except that the public is, which probably includes some investors, is
oh,
getting a
definitely,
load
yeah.
of BS, is getting a load of BS about what space is like. They make it look easy to live in the capsule, easy to do this and that. Do they really know what it meant when the toilet failed and they had to go to a Apollo style waste retrieval? How many in the audience would like to do that for a week?
Well,
I bet not one
leave aside
person
the
would want
bigger things. There's a huge leap from
to do it.
going around the moon, which, by the way, I like they had to throw that little the furthest humans have ever traveled
Travel
before.
beyond Earth, yeah.
Yeah, beyond Earth. Like what? Like an extra 100 kilometers? Okay, fine. Right? It's they went around the moon and came back. The actually landing on the moon, then creating a landing site so you could repeatedly land and take off from the moon, and then doing the construction to build facility on the moon. And the one person I was chatting with actually did make a very good point. He said, just you bury this stuff with regolith. You don't have to dig for it, to put it underground because of radiation issues, right? So pull a bunch of regolith, dump it on top of the stuff, assume it doesn't puncture your habs. The pressure is enough to keep the weight from crushing the facilities. Great. That's not going to happen in 3 years. I mean, like, when are we actually going to land on the moon? And oh, by the way, the whole Artemis program was a 20+ year jobs program that the Senate would never kill. I mean, get Rick back on the show and have him talk about the Senate launch system, right? Because I mean, there was just a giant. The thing is just like, and it even looks like reused shuttle parts. I mean, no, it's not completely, but it was a how do we keep jobs in certain states because that's where our voters are. Okay. I mean, for the amount of money we spent to go and fly around the moon, was it worth it? I don't think so.
Well, I think it probably was worth it if for inspiration alone, maybe some kids will, do some hard
Do you,
math and study and create a
it's
set.
not like the 60s, David. It really,
Well, that's what
the
I was
impact.
alluding to.
It's
Yeah.
just a test flight of the system, though. That's all it was, right? Really.
It's part of a program, and the program's totally worth it. Like they have to divide up all the steps they're going to go through before they have a base on the moon, and this is a logical way to divide it up. Send some astronauts around the moon on the first test
Yeah,
flight.
but wouldn't it have been cheaper to not do it the way they did it and actually, I don't know, take SpaceX and a few other companies and have them build vehicles and get up to the moon?
Yeah, but
This is
they
where you're talking about the hype machine. You got to like think about NASA's. These are experts on rockets. They're not sucked into the SpaceX hype machine the way you might be. Like they think that SpaceX has got a lot to prove, and they don't think they're ready.
Who built Artemis?
You mean like the Artemis
Lockheed
rocket that
Martin.
It
was
wasn't
used?
NASA. NASA
SLS?
didn't build it. NASA bought it.
No, they architected
Lockheed
it.
Martin
and
built the
yeah,
capsule.
Yeah, built part of it. Other people built part of it, but it was a government contract program.
yeah.
I mean, it's
You
like
mean SLS,
what
not
is it
Artemis?
actually? There's no 15-year plan to fly 20 more of these vehicles up to the moon.
Actually, I wanted to sort of talk about that a little bit. The Artemis program that was revealed or changed on March 24th by NASA, which to me makes a lot of sense, actually. Where the Artemis 2 went around and they wanted to check out the Orion capsule, etc., those kinds of things that happened. But they changed the Artemis 3 to do just simply orbital rendezvous with HLS, both the HLS, and then the Artemis 4 and 5 will land on the moon. So I think that is a very more sound program than what we had before. It's possible that it may work or it may not work, but that also says many people are saying this, and I'm not absolutely sure of this, but I think that says, and combining that with the budget that was sent, that SLS that you were talking about, that Lockheed built, not Artemis, the SLS, is going to be scrapped after number 5. And of course, the NRHO, which is absolute nonsense, sickle thing to do, is also gone. So, what do you think about all those kinds of changes that have taken place in the Artemis program, Shubber?
Right. So, and let me correct one thing here is, when I said Artemis, I should have referred specifically to SLS because the SLS is the problem. The SLS is this boondoggle project that's been built over decades and only now finally flying. The idea of Artemis, which is just a label for let's go back to the moon, we did Apollo, now let's do Artemis, great. There are better ways to go back to the moon. I'm not saying they've proven them yet, but for the cost that was spent on the SLS and what we spent on future vehicles, it's better to put it up for commercial competition to let companies try and fail and eventually succeed to get up there. That's my take on how you do it, because competition always drives better outcomes. But
there is going to be a lot of competition also because of the lunar base program that was talked about and revealed at the same time has about 80 launches from now until 10 years from now. That is going to require lots of commercial companies, launch companies, to provide that cadence.
Well, so then we get into a bigger economics question. So the only thing that's going to make us successfully stay in the race long enough to do this base successfully is if China actually gets there and beats us to it. Because China is the thing that will somehow keep this vehicle going longer, because if you step way back and look now at an economic fiscal point of view, does anybody here know what our current deficit this year is and what our national debt is?
Yeah, it's about 38 trillion.
39 trillion.
38
It's
trillion.
38 trillion is the
That's just
actual
about 2
debt.
trillion a year, right?
Well, this year it's
37.
2 trillion, but they just want to increase the defense budget to 1.5 trillion, which I think optically is in part because last year we finally crossed that threshold where interest payments on the debt are now greater than our defense budget. So it's the third largest item in our budget, interest payments. And that will only continue to grow because as interest rates go up, which they will when you have inflation, things like that, then that becomes, and those bonds have to get refinanced. But we're spending over $1 trillion a year on interest payments. Now let's look at the NASA budget and let's look at all the other discretionary spending that will get crowded out unless we keep borrowing money because nobody wants to raise taxes. And by the way, you can't just tax all the billionaires and have the money because even if you took all the money they all had at current values and you liquidated everything else and the rest, you would probably get rid of half the deficit for 1 year and then you'd be right back where you were before because we can't seem to stop spending. So how NASA is going to sustain a program for 10 plus years to build a moon base when the country, the other thing we don't talk about when we say 38 to 40 trillion in debt is the unfunded liabilities because the Social Security Trust Fund doesn't actually exist. And so you have all these liabilities for all these people who are going to be retiring.
$300 trillion.
So the number I saw was 120
guys,
trillion.
Yeah.
Shubber, if you could explain it for a 5-year-old, what does that mean?
Yeah, so when Social Security, so I'll just start with a really basic term. Social Security is a Ponzi scam in the literal definition of a Ponzi scam because it was started with people getting a benefit and future people paying in to give current people benefits. Because when they started the program, retirees were given Social Security because they didn't have money and they never paid into a system because it literally didn't exist before the program was created. So the first beneficiaries were paid by current workers who were paying part of their salary in Social Security costs, FICA, right? So what's interesting is back then, it all worked fine because I think the number was 62 workers for every retiree because also people didn't live nearly as long as they do now. Fast forward 80 years, what do you have? You have a program where it's now, I believe it's 6 workers for every retiree, but it's dropping down to 3. When you get down to that level, you're simply not contributing enough to cover the current expenditures on retirees who are waiting for their claims. What they won't do is they won't cut benefits using means testing, because again, originally the program was meant for people who had no other sources, but you have lots of people who actually have a decent amount of assets who are still collecting Social Security because they say, but I paid into it. But that was not actually what it was intended for, but that's what they're getting. So you won't touch that. You won't raise their retirement age, because look what happened in France when they wanted to raise the retirement age by 2 years. And literally they had rioters in the streets and all that stuff going on. No politician here is willing to touch Social Security. So you've got a $120 trillion time bomb just sitting there waiting to go off in the next 20 years. So this is where I say, I don't know that we actually have the capacity as a country to do this. Now, maybe if the $5 trillion in new value that's unlocked with AI suddenly comes into being, and we don't need to provide universal basic income to everybody because they've all lost their white-collar jobs, we'll find a way to dig out of this hole, but I don't see it. Even if we were making $1 trillion net revenue on top of what we spend, so not a 2 trillion deficit, but a 1 trillion surplus, it would still take 40 years to pay off the current debt, not including Social Security and Medicare, that is unfunded. That's how bad it is. And that's what a 5-year-old needs to
why don't we just,
understand.
like, for example, like just take all Social Security and just move it over to like a cryptocurrency system. So it's like government's got nothing to do with it anymore, right? Like all the money you pay in goes into cryptocurrency and all the money you take out goes into cryptocurrency. Everybody knows that they're going to get their money back out, just like Social Security promises. Government's hands off. No longer
There's
involved
nothing
in it
to
at
move
all.
over. Bill,
But
there's
whatever. I mean, the
nothing
point
in the
is that
lockbox.
you
There's
take
nothing in the
whatever,
lockbox.
you take that whole problem and shift it over to a system that doesn't have anything to do with the government anymore, and it's guaranteed to work. Now, what's the
But it
problem?
doesn't. It
It
doesn't.
is not guaranteed to work.
Guaranteed
It
to
will
work?
just
How?
inflate itself into nothing.
Why would
Which
why,
is
why
what
would you say
happened
that?
to
Why
Iran.
wouldn't it work just the same as before? It's now just being managed by a cryptocurrency system and blockchains instead of by the government
Where's the money
administrators.
coming from?
Blockchain is a communication system. Has nothing to do with finance.
It's the same as before. People pay into it. People, take money out from the cryptocurrency. It's like guaranteed that whatever money goes in comes out. That's what cryptocurrencies and
But
blockchains
the
do
money
really
that
well.
goes in is not enough to cover what's going out. It's decreasing and the claims are going up. That's the problem. You have a deficit.
Yep.
So cryptocurrency doesn't fix the deficit.
Well, that's true. It just means that people who retire have to live off of less money because less money is coming in. But that's
So you want to cut their benefits.
Hey,
well,
I don't want to live off of less money.
Shubber, I want
you
to.
show me a politician who's willing to actually cut Social Security benefits or move the retirement age or both.
That's just
Show me,
saying I don't believe there's going to be a lot of
300
kids.
politicians who are willing to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's what you need to pass it.
But once it's in a cryptocurrency system, the politicians are hands off. It's no longer a political issue. It becomes, yes, if we don't have enough babies to support ourselves in our old age, we're going to regret that. But it's not a political issue anymore.
Let's get back to
It's
space,
under nobody's
guys.
control.
Let's get back to
I agree.
space.
Let's get
That's
back to
actually more
space.
realistic.
Well, on rioting.
Hold on. I'm going to mute everybody. Shubber, let's go back to space. We're not here.
Let's go back to space.
solve
This is a
something.
space show, right?
Why?
Yes.
Why don't you think highly of orbital mirrors and some of the other programs that are being talked about as money makers?
Because, so there's two parts to it. The first one is I never see an actual credible use case put up for basically bad moonlight, which is it's like some of the photos I see on like LinkedIn when they go by are like, oh, we're gonna make it like daylight wherever you are, and then I'm like, okay, but leave aside just how difficult that is from a engineering and physics point of view to get the angle just right and the rest. And oh, by the way, it's moving by at 16,000 miles an hour, so it's only going to be on you for a couple of minutes. So you need a lot of mirrors in orbit, a lot of mirrors. I mean, this goes back to the whole problem of LEO constellations. In order to always have coverage for a particular area for long enough for it to matter. If you're saying, hey, I need a spotlight for 3 minutes right now so I can find my keys on the driveway. Okay, but you have to wait till the next satellite comes by for you to be able to do that. And then how much will it cost? And what is the actual use case?
And it's only moonlight. And you gave an example of the Russians who tried that some time ago. Yeah. Can you expound on that a little bit? That was a good example.
Honestly, I'm gonna have to pull it up again because it's been a while since I wrote that one. But it was so stupid. But like the hang on, let me get it for you really quickly because that's a good point. But so David, I think I put it in the category of things that go to Walking Eagle. It's like step 1, we do this. Step 3, we make lots of money. Step 2 is undefined. Right? They just kind of like, we're going to do this thing and we're going to make a lot of money. And there's like, well, yeah, but ignore all the stuff in the middle about how and like feasibility and everything else. Just trust us. It sounds really cool. And that's what they tend to do. So, bear with me for a second. I'll pull this up.
Yeah.
Where did it go? Orbital mirror crate, yeah. There we go. Okay. The Russians, that's right. Where was that?
Znamya 2.
And that's right. Back in '93, they on the Mir
Yeah.
space station, they had a 20-meter reflective membrane, which is basically a luminized sail, and it was 5 kilometers wide as a patch that moved across Europe, and it was as bright as moonlight, right? So you have a mirror the size of basically a tennis court that made a patch of sunlight that quickly whisked across Europe. Again, help me. What is the use case? And then what is the use case that would justify putting up enough of these that you could have it on demand anywhere in the world when you need it? Because it's one thing to say I can put up one mirror, but then it might be, 9 hours before it's back where it can give you light when you need it. But if you need light right now, then you need to have lots of mirrors up so that you can call it on demand, sunlight as a service. Because the thing with Uber is if I need an Uber now and one's available in 3 days, that doesn't help me. So it's got to be available when I need it. And so to do that, then you have to say, how many mirrors do I have to put up and how much does it cost to put up all those mirrors? Now, again, remind me, why do people want these mirrors other than to piss off, astronomers?
I don't buy into the business case either, but the business case as expressed by one of their proponents would be that if you have a solar farm already on the ground and it's not getting enough sunlight to supply the grid, then you order these satellites to point their sunlight on your solar farm, and then you pay for that sunlight, and then they get the money when they sell the power to the grid. Now, the economics probably doesn't work out, but that's the idea.
My solar panels don't do a hell of a lot even in a full moon. So you've got a solar farm that you're going to be paying someone to give you moonlight on for small snippets of time. So you need a lot of these satellites to go by to keep it under somewhat continual moonlight.
Yeah,
How
you need
much
to
are you
have,
willing to
like,
pay
essentially, if you look at the
on a per
size of the
kilowatt
sun,
basis?
yeah, if you look at the size of the sun in the sky, right, and it subtends an angle at
Yeah.
at the orbital altitude where your satellites are, you have to subtend the same angle with satellites. And if you have that many satellites in space, you can redirect that much sunlight back down to the solar panels.
Yeah, but you're
It's a
doing
lot of
one satellite
satellites.
going by at a time. So the problem is, how many satellites does it take to keep continual light on that solar farm long enough? Because 3 minutes of flyby power, it isn't going to do anything for a solar farm. And you have to say, how much am I willing to pay per kilowatt generated for those photons coming down to me? Because I have to factor that into the power that I'm selling to the grid, right? So I have to say, what's the cost of getting that sunlight? Because a solar farm works when the sunlight's free. When I have to pay somebody else for those photons, then you say, how much are they worth? And then you say, oh, and by the way, if I'm the guy running all these satellites in space, and that's the maximum I can charge for the photons I'm reflecting off, does it still make sense as a business case?
Yeah, so if we do like the cosine of 0.5 degrees, because 0.5 degrees is the angle subtended by the sun. Let me find the cosine here. And then multiply
And how
that by
big is
orbital
that
altitude.
satellite? How big is that satellite in space?
While he's doing that, there's a company called Aetherflux that wants to use near infrared frequencies to transmit power from space to existing solar arrays. And they've apparently got a business case for that. Have you heard of that company?
I have not, but are they doing LEO or are they doing GEO?
We can't hear you. You're
Oh,
muted.
John, you're on mute again.
I don't know the answer to that. I'll
I
provide
mean,
a
because
link
obviously
to the
that's a
company.
night and day
Leo.
problem, because the GEO goes back to what we were talking about before about it's space-based solar power. It's just using infrared wavelengths. And if it's LEO, then you're talking about having to have a huge constellation because no satellite is over a given space on the Earth for very long. It's just, minutes.
So it looks like you need about 2.6 by 2.6 size mirror, or let's say 2.6 diameter mirror, to have the same amount
2.6
of
what?
sunlight as the sun.
What's the unit?
2.6 kilometers.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Now,
So
now
it's
you're
big.
getting back to how big is the ISS?
Oh, it's way bigger than the ISS, obviously. Yeah, but I mean, that's like you would imagine making a thin film mirror that's 2.6 kilometers diameter, and then of course it probably needs to be bigger than that because the sunlight will need to like hit it at an angle. You're not going to get it straight on.
Yeah.
But
So again, like
oval shaped or
imagination's a
something.
wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Engineering is in economics are like unfortunately the cold water that's dumped on all these things.
Hey,
Yeah.
Shubber, what do you
And that's actually cold, not like space is cold where it's just a vacuum. But
Yeah, if you could
Marshall,
dump
you
cold
had a
water on
question.
it, you'd probably
Yeah.
solve a lot of the problems in space, like with your orbital data centers.
I'd also like to point out that if you did put an artificial sun in the sky at night, you have the
Mhm.
problem of screwing up the environment because your farm crops cannot tolerate having sun on it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, there are some vegetable crops, there are some plants and grasses that do very well, but you can't screw with the environment like that.
You're actually, there's a different but related issue is there are a lot of pollinators at night. We all know that moths are attracted to bright lights and the rest. It's because they navigate by starlight. And we just confuse the hell out of them with our street lights and our porch lights and the rest.
Well, you also have
You
the
do this,
migrating bird.
but moths are a massive source of pollination for our crops. And you wipe out the moth population like we're already doing to all of our daytime pollinators. And most of those vegetables you see in the grocery store, they won't exist, right? And no one's going to build little tiny robots that will go and pollinate for us to replace all the insects we wipe out, right?
Engineering requires taking care of all side effects.
Yeah,
Keep
unfortunately, that's exactly what we don't tend to do, which is why I think that, like, all this stuff about, I mean, I really believe in the long term, and long term is very long term. Might be my great, great, great grandchildren, assuming my kids and their kids and their kids end up having kids, and we don't wipe out our planet somewhere between now and then through something stupid. Um, and when I say wipe out our planet, I mean wipe out our species, not our planet. Earth will be fine. We are the ones who are in trouble, to paraphrase George Carlin. The Eventually, will we colonize other places? Yeah, we have to, right? There's an imperative, and this is where Musk isn't wrong for all the things he might be wrong about. The reason that Occupy Mars was such a good rallying cry, and I actually talk about it in the book that I'm writing, is that it's a very simple focusing function because he really believes we have to be a multiplanetary species. Now, I think in the long, 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 long run, we have to be, because science tells us that in 4 billion years, the sun's going to go nova, the Earth's going to be inside the sphere that the sun's going to expand to. So if we haven't, as a species of whatever we look like in 4 billion years, figured out how to be somewhere else, then that's the end of not just all the other species on the planet, it's the end of the human race. But between now and 4 billion years is a long time, right? I remember sitting, actually, and not to name drop, but I do this with my friends all the time because I was privileged enough to actually have a chance to work with Buzz Aldrin. And he was a client for a little while back in the 90s. We sat on a panel together in the late 90s at a conference. And then he ended up asking me to help him with Starcraft Boosters, which was his attempt to build a reusable rocket company. And he's like, we need to get to Mars, right? Because he did the whole cycling orbits and the rest of us. We need to get to Mars. I said, Buzz, you're right. But we don't need to do it in the next 10 years, right? Now, if you can convince people we need to go, like there's a planet killing problem or something else coming, we have to go, we can marshal resources and go. But most people don't care. I tell you, most people, honestly, I don't think most people cared about Artemis. Outside of the space community, I don't think most people really cared. Like, yeah, they knew we launched something, but were they following it the way they followed Apollo 1 and Apollo, or not Apollo 1, Apollo 8 when it went around? No. Right? Because there's too many other things distracting people now. They might have seen like a little thing in their TikTok as they scrolled by. They might have watched the splashdown and then moved on. I guarantee you no average person on the street can name any of the 4 astronauts who were on that capsule. I would challenge everybody on this call to be able to name all 4 of them. If you had to write them down, could you all do it at the same time?
I can do it.
I can't.
Shubber, let me ask you, because a big part of what we talk about, and also commercial space or new space, is settlement. So how I don't see the economics for that to begin with, but timeline wise, technology readiness levels wise, and just conviction.
I'd say 100 years is a short time and a long time. But it's been what, 55, 57 years since we landed on the moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've just now flown past it again. Building bases and doing stuff, even if we end up doing it for government military reasons and we end up putting a base up there and the rest, it's still going to be a long time before you go from there to people wanting to live there. Because, and this goes back to the sci-fi that all, or if not most of us, read when we were kids, right? Moon is a Harsh Mistress and all the other books that came out at the time. It's not easy, and it's kind of a one-way ticket, right? You're not going to go and live on the moon and have kids on the moon, and then they're going to come back to the Earth, right? Because they're going to grow up in 1/6 gravity. And we have no idea what that's even going to be like on human bodies yet. Like sustained 20, 30, 40 years in these environments. And living on Mars is underground, right? Or you got to build really good radiation shielded stuff because, last I checked, they still don't have a magnetic field, right? So like it's really, from a practical point of view, it's a long time. It bums me out because I grew up wanting to go to space. I still would. My family knows that if I ever win the lottery, the first 60 million are going to buy a ticket because the price has gone up. And oh, by the way, I want to say under the "we were right" thing, David, for all those people who gave me shit about Anusha when she went to space, and they were like, "Oh, it's changing space. Like women are now all going to be going to space and doing all this stuff for space tourism." How many people have gone to space and bought a ticket and sat in the ISS since the first handful?
Not very. I don't know, but not very many.
No one.
Yeah, they've been going out pretty regularly, haven't they? I thought there's another crew going out pretty soon. They're doing these like 1 week or so sort of scientific missions that are
No,
funded
no,
by
no, no.
private
Actual
enterprise.
people like the Dennis Titos of the world who said, "Here's a check. I want to go and hang out on the space station for 2 weeks." There was going to be a
Well, I mean,
line of people waiting to go. Remember, that's the way
I
they
don't
were
know.
like,
Like
"Oh
they do
no."
work. They do go up there, and they're funding themselves to go up. So it's kind of tourism, but it's also they want to get the astronaut patch. They actually do real work up there. They do
Who,
citizen science, I guess.
when did someone commercially buy a ticket to go to the space station? When was the last
When was
person?
the last person?
I
I
mean, I
thought
can't
I thought there
even
was another
get
one announced just recently.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up
Was it?
because
I think they're Axiom missions, aren't they?
The
Or am
axiom
I
well, but
missions,
thinking?
yeah.
that's not a Dennis Tito or a tourist saying, I want to go hang up there for a week. Axiom's trying to build a business and has contracts with NASA.
Well,
So
Axiom's the
that's
company
not the
that sort of
same
sorts it
thing.
out, but the
Ax-
people paying for it are
Axiom 4
billionaires.
or Axiom 3, I think, was the last one.
Who?
Axiom
Axiom 3,
4.
so that's a really high number. That's almost into 2 digits.
Yeah, so Axiom
Yeah.
4 is 2025.
So that means that 4 people have gone?
It was 4 missions, so it's probably 16 people have gone on Axiom missions, I assume, because I think it's 4 each time. And the last one was in 2025 in
Yeah, but
June.
they're not going up like Dennis Tito or Anusha. They're going up because they have a contract and they're trying to develop their business. I think that's a little bit different than just a joyrider. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the people who are going up are paying for this. So doesn't that make them kind of like
it's a business investment.
No, no. Well, we're talking about space tourism specifically. And tourism is very different than I'm trying to go build a pharmaceutical company in space, so I'm buying a ride up there so I can go do science, right?
Right? They're very
yeah, it's
different.
hard to say. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
If it
so
was
let me jump in
And
here.
and Axiom has 3 paying customers per mission, 50 to 55 million per seat.
Yeah. Right.
So
And this is the total number of people who visited the ISS and paid their own way, 13.
Okay.
so there's a new company, speaking of hype, called GRU Space, Galactic Resource Utilization Space. And I provided a link to my blog article on this. And it's a Cal grad who formed a company last year, and he has Kevin Cannon on his team, who's a pretty brilliant geologist, space geologist into ISRU, and they want to build the first hotel on the moon. Have you heard of this company?
I have not.
They
But
just got on
he
60 Minutes, not on
you
60
can,
Minutes, on Laura Trump.
yeah, he's all over the press, and he's hyping his, and so he wants to build the first hotel on the moon.
By the way,
Yeah.
stop. He's not
Yeah.
all over the press because they don't even answer space show invitations to come on
He's
space system.
almost,
Sorry,
but not the real
sorry, David.
press.
He won't.
Yeah,
They
not the
don't
real
do
press.
that kind
Yeah.
of media. They'll do kiss ass media. That's
Yeah.
my complaint.
And that's because there are no
Right.
journalists in regular media anymore.
Anyway,
There haven't been for a long time.
so we'll see, but I agree with you. It's exciting. It's you know, it gets a lot of press, but we'll see if he actually gets backers and if he's successful. But he's
said
got a
2 years
business
out,
plan.
right?
He's got a roadmap, and he's trying to execute on it, and he's all over Twitter. So
Yeah, actually, I met him at this conference a month ago at American University, the Beyond Earth conference, and I invited him and I told him suggested his name to
Yeah, I
David.
know.
David contacted him and he never replied.
He
You
never
know,
replied, and I actually had his email address from AJ, and I sent him a note and copied it to AJ, and nothing has
he may have
been
heard of he may have heard of the wisdom team, so that scared him.
So and this is part of like we're even like, so I remember back in the 90s, Shimizu Corporation from Japan had a bunch of stuff about like we're gonna do lunar construction and we're gonna like do all this, like how we're gonna process red growth
great
in the mass, which
pictures. Yeah, they had great
yeah,
pictures.
and I still remember some of the photos from back then. Well, they just made an announcement. I kid you not. It was on April 8th, it looks like, or April 7th, to build a lunar ring, a belt of solar panels around the moon's equator to beam energy to the Earth. So geo is not very far. Let's go all the way to the moon, build a massive ring, and they're talking about generating up to 13,000 terawatts of energy per hour. I was like, there's no journalism left. You just make shit up and people will print it because the more, I mean, it's just science fiction. It's like fan fiction for space.
What I want to know from you and from everybody else is how can I write this kind of shit and go and talk to these people, investors, and get some money for it?
So this is part of the problem, and I've talked with people about this for years. Is like, if you didn't have, like, if you weren't raised well and you had, like, oh, I don't know, integrity and ethics, all those little pesky things that keep you from just being a con artist, you can make a mint because it's you can make it sound credible.
Yeah.
You got the right PhDs and stuff behind it, and you can pitch anything. And there's so much money out there right now. There's so much liquidity thanks to the financial crisis of 2008 and quantitative easing, chasing any deals because they need to get returns. And this is why so much money is flowing into these things, because they're desperate for returns. There's just not enough things to invest all that liquidity sloshing around the markets in.
Well,
How do we make sure that the proper things get invested in? Because obviously all these crazy ideas can't all be bad. Like, there's got to be some crazy ideas that really are going to turn into profitable businesses one day. How do we make sure that we're not just coming down on every good idea, every idea that's out there, assuming it's crazy?
Well, as long as you use the same logical razor for analyzing the ideas. For me, I use economics and engineering and then physics as the three things I look at, right? Physics, the basic stuff like, the Stefan-Boltzmann equation. I say, okay, what does it take to radiate energy, to dump heat? That's the equation. There's no question about it. That's the equation. You come up with some magical new way to radiate heat in a vacuum, let us know. Outside of that, that's how you radiate heat. So then you say how much energy you're trying to dump, and that tells you the size of the radiator you need, depending on which, fluid you're running through it. That's physics. Okay. Then there's the engineering. Have we ever built a structure like that before? How difficult is it? How much mass does it take to orbit to get that structure into space? Can we do those things? Engineering, physics you can't change. Engineering you can solve for at a certain level, right? Back, I remember 25 years ago, they thought 30 nanometers was the smallest you could make a transistor circuit. We are way below that now because they came up with new ways to do it, right? And then there's economics. At the end of the day, supply and demand has never changed as a basic law of economics, right? So you have to figure out, does this actually make sense financially, which also includes time value of money. Investing $1 trillion now for a return 20 years from now, that is $1.5 trillion, is a losing proposition every day of the week, because there are lots of better places to put that money to get 5 trillion or 10 trillion in 20 years, right? Just go look at a Roth 401k to understand how that works.
Do you think people are actually aware of these numbers? Like when StarCloud launches their satellite with a GPU in it, does inference on it, is the information that we need to say whether it will or will not work actually available to us, or we have to just guess?
The information is available, but also you have to ask who invested in it, right? So who gave them $40 million? What they did was they went to Y Combinator, and Y Combinator is a great place to go and get plugged into the Silicon Valley, hype cycle and money machine. And they put up $2 million to launch a satellite that generated enough buzz that they could raise 40 million to go and build more stuff, right? That they primed the pump. A lot of companies don't have that kind of money to go do that, but they also have the pedigree of, SpaceX alumni, and SpaceX has the halo effect, which I mentioned way back at the beginning of this call. You put those things together, and you can get people to give you money because there's a lot of. So
we really know that their ideas
because now we're running out of time. But
how do we know?
There were old school VCs, and there's right now what are called VCs, but are basically young people who've never run a company, who know how to crunch numbers on a spreadsheet, came out of Wharton, and instead of going to Wall Street, they went to Silicon Valley because it's a lot more cool, and you get to drive Teslas and not wear suits, right? But they don't. But I still remember I had the absolute privilege of having a mentor in Ed Tuck. And Ed Tuck, for those of you who knew him, Falcon Fund was his little VC he set up after he made all of his money. He's the guy who built Magellan. He's an engineer. He built Magellan, sold it for a lot of money. Then he built a concept for Teledesic and sold that to Gates and McCaw, right? The original Starlink. That's that guy. And then he started a VC to help entrepreneurs because he knew how hard it was. There are very few old school VCs like that. He's passed away, but most of the VCs out there right now are just throwing money at what they think are cool ideas. I know this guy just raised money recently for our company, an AI company, and I got a VC to put money in by saying, look, we'll leave room for you if you want, but we've already got this round spoken for. If you want to get in, we'll give you. And we're being completely legit. And the story we told them was absolutely true. But did they do any due diligence? No. They're like, we're in. Here's our check. That was it. Because it was FOMO. It was fear of missing out.
Well, Shubber, I don't think we should get you started on Musk's plans for building mass drivers on the moon to launch his orbital data centers, right?
Yeah. So now it's like 6 impossible things before breakfast. But I do remember that from the Moon is the Harsh Mistress. That was their ultimate weapon. They said, fine, we'll just start hurling rocks at you until you use, sue for peace.
What's your opinion about changing the subject a little bit about nuclear energy? So
which kind?
Advanced reactor, thorium molten salt reactor, basically.
I'm actually curious. I have a book I haven't read yet on thorium reactors because I kept hearing stuff about how thorium was like this magical thing no one's ever really paid attention to because we wanted uranium because we needed plutonium because of the Cold War and the arms race, right?
Yeah.
But and I really should dig that off my shelf. It's sitting over there with many other books I haven't had time to read yet. But I do think nuclear power, we made a big mistake after 3 Mile Island and got scared with the China syndrome, all the rest of that, to move away from nuclear power. France is 50% nuclear power if I last checked. It might be even 80%, right? And I'm pretty sure that they're fine, right?
It's about 80, 70, 80%.
Yeah. Nuclear power is a great source. The problem is permitting, construction, all the other things that take to actually make it happen. The reason Microsoft went and did a deal to restart the reactor at 3 Mile Island because it already exists. It takes a long time to get this going. Now, small-scale commercial nuclear reactors are a really interesting field that if they can get regulatory approval, can speed up the time frame for building reactors, and they're much smaller and provide distributed power on the grid. But again, unproven technology, but that to me is an engineering problem and a regulatory problem, not a physics problem. I don't know about Edge. I don't know about thorium though, but you've reminded me I need to read that book.
Yeah, and actually, I would like to send you some information about the work that I've done on that. Over the years and stuff. So take a look at that and see what you think. I would be interested in your opinion on that.
Yeah, no, I would love to.
Yeah, send me a reminder, AJ, and I'll send you his email address.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll put it in the chat as well because it's actually really easy.
Where should not where? What's the most valuable thing space advocates can do to further their dream and passion? And do they need to stay grounded in reality, or can they be out there and never, never la la land to inspire people, or is it a happy mix?
It's an interesting way to frame the question. What I would say is that we do a service to the community by holding the community accountable because
you do, but not.
No, but we as a group, by bringing, and I'm not saying not to dream, not to think about things to do in the future, but it's also understanding timeframes and not promising to other people who don't know as much as we do about this, that the impossible will happen sooner than they expect, because it's like the boy who cried wolf. You do that a few times and then it doesn't pan out and they stop listening and the attention goes elsewhere. We actually have an interesting window now where, given all those stuff that's happening with China and with the capabilities we have with the actual launch side of SpaceX, to actually go and build more really interesting infrastructure in space. But if we let the hype get away from it, I really think that the cratering of SpaceX post-IPO will do so much damage to the industry because it was going to drag a lot of other stuff down with it because so many hopes were pinned on it. And there's simply no way to justify a $1.75 trillion valuation for that business. There's not.
Do you think it will crater then?
I think it will. but I'm not going to short it right after it IPOs because I'm not an idiot. You never know. Market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, is that great old quote. But
Right.
the I made money when a Virgin, went down because I was like, there's no business here, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
but to me, making money on the failure of SpaceX is not the goal. The goal is to keep the misdirections and the hype from damaging the actual industry getting built that we all want to see happen.
What is the role, if any, for we in this informed advocate community? I'm using informed on purpose. Um, given the state of media and public education.
Calling out journalists when they publish dribble, right? That's, I think, the biggest thing is holding. And maybe maybe this is my Don Quixote moment, right? I just a girl can dream, but I really wish journalism would come back. I kind of miss it. We used to have journalists a long time ago, but now they're just boosters and hype people, and oftentimes they don't even realize they're doing it. They just parrot a press release or whatever somebody tells them.
Read the telemarker. Yeah.
Yeah, read the teleprompter. That's even worse. Like broadcast is even worse. But like long form journalism, I remember back in the 90s, actually, it was back in the KPMG days. I used to read Scientific American every month when it come. When I was a kid in high school and in college, I would read my Scientific American. Like, look at all these articles. This is so interesting. This is like all these fascinating developments, and that great article in the back, connections, that would like make all these linkages with different things. Right? I loved it. And then I started working in space, and I saw an article in Scientific American that talked about an aspect of the space industry, and I'm like reading the whole article going, but this is all wrong. And then I had that epiphany. I bet you there are scientists in biology who are reading the biology articles going, but this is all wrong. And the people reading the chemistry ones going, no, this is wrong. And the ones reading the engineering one going, no, that's not how it works. And I'm like, crap, does that mean that everything I've been reading, like, was Scientific American just Omni with better like packaging? And after that, I started to notice it everywhere, that the actual reporting was getting worse and worse and worse. And then you always go back to the basic. Why? What's the benefit? Who benefits from not? Nobody wants to. It's like the press briefing room in the White House. Doesn't matter who's in charge at the time. They never ask hard questions because they don't want to get not invited back to the White House. They don't want to not be able to ride on Air Force One. So what do? They ask kind of hard questions, but not really too hard. They never challenge. They never follow up, because doing that, they could lose their ticket. And what they really care about is being part of that club.
And also, clickbait is becoming a big thing now. So more clickbaits you get.
Yeah, and now we have AI, so now you don't even know if anything you see is real anymore.
Marshall, what is it you want to say?
That's exactly my line of thinking, because I used to read Scientific American, for probably 30, 40 years. But due to the internet and communication and so on like that, it's exactly what you're saying. You want to be in the club that gets paid real well to write the cheap stories that develop more cheap stories.
Right.
And those people on the outside, the TikTok people, can write all sorts of crazy stuff. And once in a while it pops up to, oh, isn't this interesting? And there's nothing to it. What was that one show that there was something on TV called Mr. Wiggles? Those five guys dancing wiggly for 2-year-olds, and they were trying to say it was the greatest psychological improvement, blah, 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 for children. And I'm sitting here going, they aren't going to remember squat about it. At least I remember Captain Kangaroo, right?
Yeah.
He did something. They're just standing here wiggling. It's stupid. And they trying to sell it off. They are selling junk, and it's very hard to turn around and tell them no, because they just move on to the next customer. So
Well,
it's a part of the communications that we have.
but I really feel like I'm starting to get to the point where I'm feeling like the movie Idiocracy was just ahead of its time. But it was a documentary.
Shubber, I came to this awareness from a very different perspective and got to pretty much the same place that you're talking about. So my younger son was born in '84, and this was before I had finished my graduate school studies, but I was about to start embarking on them, my PhD studies, not my MBA studies. And he was born with the fatal disease of CF, and we were told that he maybe would live for 7 years and it'd be a really shitty life. So I started following the press on CF, Time Magazine, The Economist,
Hmm.
and he was treated at UCSF, which is a great medical school, great doctors. I'd take the articles that I would read that said this is happening, and we're looking at 2 years out or three, and they'd look at me and they'd read the story and we don't know what they're talking about. So I started calling the doctors and the researchers mentioned in the articles, and I found most of their numbers. And I said, I'm a parent of a 1 year old or a 6 months old. See, and I read your article in The Economist, which had a better track record than most of them, or in Life, or in Time, or whatever it was. Are you really working on this that'll be ready in 6 months? And 100% of them said the journalist who interviewed us didn't understand what we were talking about, had no idea of the process of research, the time it takes, the fact that
Mhm.
it's not done just by how much money you get, and they printed conclusions based on questions they asked me, which I did not confirm for them, like this will
Yep.
be ready in 18 months. I did this for the first 5 years of Michael's life, and I realized that all of this entire world is a lie. And it is a lie, and we're being misled by the incompetence or maybe the deliberate act of the people writing the stories, not the scientists. They would beg for a truthful, kind of hard fact interview, which they were
So
not getting. And that taught me that there's a lot of BS going on. Where before this process, I was one of the ones who said, oh, yeah, 6 months from now, we'll discover the CF gene. And then Panacea will be here. It was 5 years before they discovered it after Michael was born. I mean, item after item after item was a lie in every damn thing I read. And I
well,
read some of
it
it.
always goes back to the same question, pro bono, right? Who benefits and why, right? Whether it's they benefit because they sell magazines, or they benefit because they get contracts from the government, or things always happen because somebody's got to benefit somewhere. That's what it comes down to. And like you reminded me of another lie, and we'll end on this because I know we're,
Coming up
we're
on
running
2 hours.
long. But ISS, right? Again, as a space person, I still remember when I was a scout. My kids are scouts now. I'm privileged enough to be able to spend time with them in scouting, both as assistant scoutmaster. But I remember when I was a Boy Scout in Downey, walking through the Discovery orbiter while it was still under construction. Right, an amazing vehicle, and I got a chance to see it launch in the late '90s. So, um, like, I love everything about that program. ISS, Space Station Freedom, Space Station Independence, then the ISS, um, was one vote away from being canceled in Congress. And
Mhm.
Dan Golden went up and told the famous lie that industry was waiting to use this thing. And so fast forward 6, 7 years, and when I was at KPMG, we were put under contract by the prime contractor, who was getting a little nervous about this thing as the first modules were being assembled. Think, well, who really wants to use this thing? And so I did a study, and I talked to 73. I have a copy of the study still here in a box. I talked to 73 chief research officers, CTOs, VPs of R&D. So the head of R&D for 73 of the largest companies in America across multiple industries, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, a whole range of different areas. And I asked them all the same question. Out of 73, how many do you think had any intention of using ISS for R&D?
Zero. Zero.
Wow, you're a guest lecturer on the Space Cynics now. Yes, zero, right? And I was like, well, I can't just write a study that has one slide that says no one wants to use it. So because they were paying us real money, so I had to go a little bit deeper. So I went back and I came up with the top 10 reasons why ISS was not designed for commercial. But what was really interesting was they used the very convincing but very flawed Chinese math on Congress and on the public, which said, at the time, again, this is the early 90s, we spent in industry about $88 billion on R&D. And they were saying that we expect $400 million, one third of the ops cost. So $400 million for ISS for R&D contracts. Seems like a small number, right? Like out of all that money, we're going to spend a tiny bit on ISS. Sounds very plausible. Except what they didn't actually look into was there's basic R&D, there's applied R&D, and there's production R&D. And ISS was only good at basic R&D. But if you looked at that 88 billion, of the 88 billion, only about 8 billion was basic R&D across the entire US. Every university lab, every government lab, every private lab combined, $8 billion. Now you're saying 5% of all research in the country is going to move to low Earth orbit to be done on ISS. Leave aside the fact that the facility is not very big and they had no pricing for the racks and they had no really clear power, and all the different things. So we went through all the problems, but also manifesting. You want to fly a payload? It's going to be 3 years before you can refly. Well, for some industries, that's 2 life cycles. So what's the point, right? So there are all the reasons why they didn't want to use it. But if they actually came up and said, yeah, we don't have any customers lined up, they would have canceled the program. So yeah, people lie.
Well, it hasn't changed much. Maybe a little
$120 billion later, tell me what we got from it.
Well, we do have a great national lab doing pharmaceuticals and other research.
That we're going to deorbit soon?
And we're going to trash it.
Yeah, didn't we tell the Russians they had to deorbit Mir because it was too old? That was back when it was like 15 years old.
Yeah, and they were trying to save that commercial group.
I remember that, and I think Charles actually was supposed to be, or maybe he did fly on the flight where they tried to watch it re-enter. That was like a Continental Airlines flight that went over the South Pacific trying to see the re-entry. But the point being, ISS is twice as old as Mir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wanted to say that whatever you're talking about, journalists and all that, and when I was after becoming a scientist or during that time or something, I really felt that the true scientists don't lie. They will be telling you the truth, at least in ARWA journals or whatever, some journals or something like that. But then I started doing a lot of calculations and a lot of things, and how you can manipulate the number one thing, how you can manipulate something in a scientific conclusion to reach completely different conclusion, and then you can also publish that, etc. So I found a lot of falsities and a lot of lies, even in the scientific community, which I did not expect, and I was hoping for what existed 100 years ago here in this country and the Western civilization, etc. It didn't really pan out too much, but now it is much worse. Now with this thing, and I mean, I can give an example of climate scientists who have also said a lot of things which are not true and are turning out to be, and also in many other fields in aerospace.
So let me put a slight nuance on that, Ajay, because I don't disagree, but I think you have to start with is real science and scientific methods starts with I have a hypothesis, I'm going to get some data, if there's enough there, I'll turn it into a theory, and then I'll get a lot more data, but it will almost never actually become a law because, like hell, it's still called atomic theory for a reason. But it's the best theory that fits the data we have. Science is always about trying to disprove what's there, and honest science is a willingness to say, I might be wrong. Let's go see what the data tells me, and let's go try to craft the best thing. So will scientists make mistakes? Sure, because that is literally the nature of science, is that we test and we try to figure out, and then eventually somebody comes along and says, yeah, but that's actually hell, there was string theory, and then it's like, no, it's actually dark matter. Then it happens in every domain. But if you're starting with, I want to get this grant, or I want to become this thing, or I've got this agenda, and then I'm going to find the data that supports it, then you're getting into not science anymore. The other part of it is I still have a book here. I have a lot of books on my shelf, but one of the books I have, I got my first year statistics class that I've kept. It's a little orange book about this thick, and the book is called How to Lie with Statistics, because you can have statistics and you can tell anything you want with that data.
Yeah.
So the question is, are you trying to tell a story, or are you trying to figure out a riddle? If you're trying to figure out a riddle, that's science. If you're trying to tell a story, that's not science.
Yeah, and I don't try to mean that all scientists are like that or anything. I'm just
No.
saying that the percentage of such people has gone up from what used to be maybe 1 or 2% to about 10%.
Or maybe it's just that you're exposed to a lot more of it because there's a much higher flow through of the data. Because who knows how many scientists back in the late 1800s were doing experiments with electricity or germs or whatever that were really just taking money from benefactors. Well,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
the system really directs a lot of people to do this in order to get funds.
But we
that's
created a system that's a machine for turning out money to do
Yeah,
certain
and there's
things.
a lot of gray area. So, I mean, one cannot make conclusions, definite conclusion. You can only point to a direction. That's all.
What's your next Cynics op-ed?
Hang
I was
on, Marshall's got a question, and then
okay.
I'll give you an
I was
answer.
going to ask this point, and that is, as technology has gotten more and more technical, a lot of more detail, et cetera, things are much more complex to make things work. In other words, the first assembly line for a Model T, by today's standards, is a piece of cake. Any fool could have made it. Trying to do the technology for assembly line of a Tesla is much, it's a huge process, very detailed. And because of that, if you have an idea and you want to push that idea, to really sell it, you have to have a massive amount of engineering behind it. And you've got to have some way of showing that that engineering is sound, that you just don't have some little parameter out of whack that, causes the whole thing to fall apart. And that's the real problem. You have to come out there, make the new object, the new product. You have to show that there's a market for the product, and you've got to figure out some way of manufacturing it in a cost-effective manner. And compared to 1900, hey, there wasn't too many products around, and everybody knew basically how to do almost all of them. Versus now, the production lines are absolutely, it takes a team of people, very bright people, to just keep it running. So that's an inherent problem that SpaceX is basically doing with Starship.
Well, they are doing that is good. Is they are not waiting 3, 4, 5 years in between each flight to try to design the perfect next one. They're doing lots of experiments, which is how they got it, how they're getting so many iterations. It's they're still experimenting though. There's still so much data they have to gather before they make it come back, land, and then be turned around and reused again. But again, engineering problems to me are solvable if you have a lot of bright people and you have money and you have the resources and you have data. I mean, look at the chopsticks they use for catching the rocket. The only way you do that is when you have enough data on the telemetry of the rockets coming back and how accurately you can control its flight. When you do that 50 times, that you can get it down to only an error rate of 1 meter. Well, then you can say, fine, let's land it on the tower, because you can do that. You can only do that. You couldn't do that on the first flight. You couldn't do that on the 5th flight. They would have crashed. They would have crashed into the rocket and in the tower or something. So David, you had your question for me because I know we're about to hit time.
Yeah, what is your next op-ed for Cynics planned?
It might actually be on, are we really going back to the moon? But this one's actually going to be more about the stuff we talked about with the finances, because I worry about this country. I worry about it for my kids, because we're like Britain around the time of the fall of Singapore, right? I think we are an overextended empire that hasn't realized that we're not. The cover of The Economist was actually really good this past week. There's the old, what's the old adage they used on the cover? It said, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. And it just did a picture of, Donald Trump with Xi behind him kind of smiling, right? Because like our priorities, our like there's so many things wrong right now. And I don't know, it's very different than the 1960s in the first space race. And I don't know that we have, as a nation, the alignment and the vision and the leadership and everything else and the money to pull this off.
Can people get notices on your articles? Is there a sign up on the WordPress site?
I have no idea. It's been so long since I used it. I just kind of relogged in, changed my password, so it was like, oh, hey, you're back after 10 years, and maybe. But I'll tell you what. When I do write one, I'll let you know, and then you can figure out how to put it in your show or let people know. For anybody who's got nothing better to do with their time, they can read it.
And it's spacecynic.wordpress.com, correct?
I believe that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, cynic is plural, listeners.
Cynics is plural because there's more than one of us.
Singular, cynic.
Oh, hang on, let me check.
Yeah, no, it's without
it's
the
actually...
S. I made a mistake on that.
Oh, you know what? You're right, because originally it was just me.
Yeah, so it's spacecynic.wordpress.com.
Yep, that's it.
And then the menu box up on the right has all of his latest articles.
And there aren't that many, but I'll do more. I do need to put one up there about the reflight rates for putting up a million satellite constellation, because I think anybody who just does the basic math, assume a satellite lasts 5 years, that means you have to put up 200,000 a year just to keep replenishment going. So then pick your favorite rocket and figure out how many launches that takes, and then look at how many launches any rocket's ever done and ask yourself if it actually makes sense.
Okay, we'll look forward to them, and hopefully we can talk to you down the road and do this again.
Oh, I got a question for everybody here. What are the odds that before 2050 we will experience the Kessler effect?
2050, 50?
Yeah.
I'd say probably 20% maybe, 80% no.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
I'm hopeful that we improve our ability to track objects and manage objects in space, and so we get ahead of it. So I think the odds are going to be closer to 5%, just because I have faith in our civilization to be able to avoid it.
Have you noticed the patch of plastic in the Pacific?
Yeah, well, I may be misplaced faith, but I do have faith.
No, I really wish I could be as optimistic. I'm actually working on trying to be more optimistic, but it's because it's not fun being cynical. But it's just you see so much nonsense.
Where do you put the odds for it? What are your odds on that?
Well, so I think that there's two different ways it can happen, neither of which is good. One is that somebody does try to deploy way too many satellites at once, and then some pachinko machine effect happens, and you Kessler effect, right? And I would say odds of that, assuming someone actually does try to deploy a 500,000 or million satellite constellation, I put it 30%, so 30 or so percent. The other one though is, and this goes back to Buzz Aldrin, one of his books he wrote. This is the plot in it. I still remember it. Might have been called The Return. I can't remember which book it was, but North Korea launched a nuke into space, right? So this is the thing that, you don't have to be able to shoot at other countries, just shoot it straight up and then detonate it and watch what happens. And it just trashed all of low Earth orbit, which, affected a lot of different things, including the ISS at the time. So if somebody wants to mess with our entire system, they would aim up and not at us. So who knows what's going to happen in the next 25 years geopolitically, but I wouldn't put it past some state.
North Korea just test fired 2 big ICBMs today.
Yeah.
Or yesterday.
Yeah, but it could just as easily be like, any country that's on its back foot and ready to, and has nothing left to lose, like they might just say, yeah, I'll go down, but I'm taking you with me. Because what happens to us if GPS fails? What happens if GPS fails? You got telecommunications, you got power, you got all these different things that are tied into the GPS signals.
Yeah,
right?
And actually, General Gutlin, I think his name is, for the Space Command, just a few days ago said that they have some classified information that Russians are trying to build a satellite that can, nuclear satellite that can do what you were talking about North Korea doing.
Yeah.
So
it's a doomsday
don't
weapon,
know,
right?
don't know, huh? Yeah, don't know
Yeah.
if this is all.
Which brings up the great quote from, and let's see if anybody knows this before we hang up here. What movie was this from? What's the point of building a doomsday weapon if you don't tell anybody about it?
I don't know.
I don't remember that movie.
Oh, come on.
Dr.
Y'all are
Strangelove,
killing
of
me
course.
here.
Dr. Strangelove,
Thank
that
you.
is.
Thank
Yeah.
you, John.
Oh,
Dr.
okay.
Strangelove. Yes.
Strangelove. Okay.
Yes.
Hmm.
And fluoridation of our water. All right. But no, none of that stuff ever happens in real life. Okay. With that, gentlemen, this has been fun.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sure.
All
Yeah.
right. Well,
David, I'll see you again in 10 years. Is that about right?
yeah, unless you come to Vegas or I go back to Maryland or something. So
Okay.
You are
and
in
I gotta go pick
Maryland,
up my son.
Shubber, you are in Maryland?
Yeah, I live in North Potomac. So
Oh,
just
you do?
outside of
Oh,
DC.
okay. Yeah,
Are you
we
going
Yeah,
to
where are you?
Ascend and ISDC?
Say again?
Are you going to Ascend and ISDC in May and
When is
June?
that?
Ascend is in May, and ISDC is in June, right at the beginning of June. They're
I
in
could.
Washington.
I don't have the details. I should look them up. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta just hang on.
I can send you the details if you want.
Please do. Please do.
And I live in McLean, so it's not too far from.
Oh, I
From
come
your-
that way all the time. We should
Oh,
definitely catch up.
You should catch up. Yeah.
Okay, I gotta go. I gotta pick up my son from a scout event. So,
Okay.
gentlemen, be well
very much.
and really enjoy the conversation.
Agreed with
You
it. Thank
too.
you very much. Take
Thank you.
All
care.
right, take care, everyone. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.